When my daughter told me I was just a sentimental old woman who didn't understand business, I just nodded and packed the boxes like she asked. 4 days later, I was on a private jet with a billionaire car collector, discovering that my husband hadn't just been a mechanic. He had been a king in a secret world of treasure hunters. My daughter, Clara, was about to find out that while she inherited the garage, I was about to inherit the kingdom. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Let me tell you how I went from being a grieving widow, evicted from her own home, to the woman holding a map to a forgotten fortune. Because believe me, honey, this story has more hidden compartments than a Prohibition-era roadster. Just a month ago, I was Eleanor Vance, a quiet woman who had been happily married to Arthur for 47 years. I thought our life was an open book. He ran a small, respected classic car restoration shop in our town, a place that always smelled of oil, metal, and hard work. When he died suddenly from a stroke at 72, the light of my world went out. Clara, our only child, arrived with her husband David, a man who always looked like he was calculating the value of everything in the room, including the people. They swooped in, full of performative grief and sharp-edged efficiency. "Oh, Mom, this must be so devastating for you," Clara said, her hug feeling more like a measurement for a coffin. "You can't possibly manage all this on your own." All this, she meant the modest 2-story house we'd lived in for 40 years, and the garage out back that was Arthur's sanctuary. I should have recognized the glint in her eye wasn't tears. It was ambition. Clara had always been her father's girl, but she'd never once picked up a wrench. She loved the idea of the business, the romance of it, but she had no patience for the grease under the fingernails. After she married David, who managed a portfolio of some kind, she became even more obsessed with optics and profitability. My role, it seemed, had always been to be the silent, supportive backdrop to their lives. The funeral was a blur, but the days after were painfully sharp. Clara and David made our home their headquarters. They'd have hushed conversations over laptops at my kitchen table, spreading out spreadsheets where my recipe books used to be. "Mom, we need to be realistic about the future," David started one evening, sliding a folder across the table. "Arthur left the business to Clara, which is wonderful. But he took out several loans against the house to keep it afloat. The shop wasn't doing as well as he let on." I stared at him, my heart sinking. Arthur was so proud, so meticulous. It didn't sound like him. "He was protecting you, Mom," Clara added, her voice syrupy with false sympathy. "He didn't want you to worry. But the reality is, the house is mortgaged to the hilt. We can't afford to maintain it and the business loans." The final nail was hammered in the following week. I was in Arthur's workshop, just breathing in his scent that still lingered on an old flannel shirt, when Clara walked in, holding a stack of glossy brochures. "Mom, David and I have found the perfect solution. There's a lovely senior living community just across town, the Golden Sunset Villas. It's all inclusive. You'd have your own little apartment and no more worries about, well, anything." She was evicting me. From the home I'd raised her in, the home I'd shared with the love of my life for 4 decades. She was sending me to a waiting room for the afterlife. "But this is my home," I whispered, the words feeling fragile and foolish in the air. Clara's patient facade cracked. "Actually, Mom, it's not. The house is an asset of the business now, tied to the debt. David's lawyers have been over it. I'm the sole proprietor. I've been letting you stay here out of courtesy, but we need to sell this property to consolidate the business debt and free up capital for expansion." The coldness in her voice was a slap. 47 years of marriage, of building a life, reduced to collateral. "Find a nice, quiet place, Mom," she said, her tone softening into that infuriating, patronizing cadence. "You're just a sentimental old woman. You don't understand the complexities of modern business." That was the phrase that echoed in my head as I packed. Sentimental old woman. I packed my life into boxes, each photo, each book, a painful memory. David watched me with an impassive expression, occasionally pointing out that some of Arthur's old furniture should be sold for a good price. "You won't have room for this at the villas, Eleanor," he said, tapping on Arthur's favorite leather armchair. "Best to liquidate." Liquidate. Such a cold word for erasing a life. He drove me to the Golden Sunset Villas himself in his sterile gray sedan. He handed the manager my first month's rent in a crisp envelope and gave me a perfunctory pat on the shoulder. "You'll be much happier here, Eleanor. No stress." He meant no bother to them. The apartment was small and smelled of lemon-scented disinfectant and loneliness. The window looked out over a parking lot. For 2 days, I sat there, surrounded by boxes, drowning in a silence that was heavier than grief. It was despair. But on the 3rd day, a spark of defiance flickered to life. I started unpacking the boxes from Arthur's workshop, the ones David had labeled junk for disposal. And in the bottom of a dusty crate filled with old carburetors, I found them, a stack of a dozen leather-bound journals. Arthur had always been a writer, a documenter. I thought they were just old service logs. I opened the first one. The early entries were what I expected. Notes on engine restorations, sketches of car parts, thoughts on a difficult project. But as I kept reading, the entries started to change. He began writing about the hunt, about clients who weren't just looking for a restoration, but for a resurrection. He wrote in a code I slowly began to understand. A Sleeping Beauty wasn't a car in for repairs. It was a rare, forgotten vehicle hidden in a barn for 50 years. A patron wasn't a customer. It was a wealthy, obsessive collector. He described a secret world operating in the shadows of the classic car community. He wasn't just Arthur Vance, the friendly town mechanic. He was a legend in this hidden world, a man known only as the Ghost, for his ability to find automotive treasures that were thought to be lost to time forever. My head was spinning. The business Clara inherited, Vance Classic Restorations, was a front. A perfect, legitimate cover for his real work. The real money wasn't in the invoices Clara and David were scrutinizing. It was in finder's fees, handshake deals, and commissions that were staggering. He'd write about finding a one-of-a-kind Bugatti in a French vineyard, a pre-war Alfa Romeo in a dusty Argentinian garage. The fees he mentioned were in the hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions. All handled through trusts and discreet bank accounts I never knew existed. And then I found the entry that changed everything. It was dated 6 months before he died. "Clara sees the garage, but she doesn't see the art," he wrote. "She and that boy David, they see assets and liabilities. They don't see the soul. They would sell a Stradivarius for the price of the wood. I've made provisions. The will they will read is simple. She gets the business, the bricks and mortar. But my legacy, the real hunt, is protected. It can only be passed on to someone who honors the passion, not the profit. The key is in the heart of the workshop. She will never find it. She doesn't have the eyes to see." My heart hammered against my ribs. The key is in the heart of the workshop. What did it mean? I thought about the workshop, every inch of it. The main workbench, the one he'd built with his own hands when we were first married. He always called it the heartbeat of the place. He'd spent thousands of hours there. I had to get back in. That night I couldn't sleep. I called a taxi, my hands shaking as I gave the driver my old address. The house was dark. Clara and David must have been at their own home in the city. I still had my old key. It felt strange and criminal to be sneaking into my own home. I let myself in and went straight to the garage. The air was cold and still. All of Arthur's tools were neatly in their places, but it felt empty, soulless. I ran my hands over the main workbench. It was made of thick, heavy oak, stained and scarred from decades of work. "The heart of the workshop," I whispered. I looked for seams, for latches, for anything out of the ordinary. Nothing. I felt under the lip of the bench, my fingers tracing the rough wood. And then I felt it. Not a latch, but a small, almost imperceptible indentation in the shape of his thumbprint. He had a habit of bracing his hand in that exact spot when he was deep in thought. I pressed my own thumb into it, then my whole hand, pushing against the spot. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft, hydraulic hiss, a section of the pegboard behind the workbench, the part that held all his favorite hammers, swung inwards, revealing a hidden, fireproof safe set into the wall. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. I had looked at that wall 10,000 times and never seen it. The safe had a simple combination lock. My mind raced. What would he have used? Our anniversary? My birthday? Then I remembered something he wrote in the journals. The numbers that started it all. The date of the first car he ever sold, a 1957 Chevy Bel Air. He told me that story 100 times. He sold it on May 26, 1978. I dialed the numbers, 52678. The lock clicked open. Inside the safe was a single, pristine file folder. It contained a different will, a holographic will, written entirely in his own hand, signed and dated just 4 months ago. It was accompanied by a letter addressed to his longtime lawyer, a man named Mr. Abernathy, with instructions to be opened only by me, or if the Vance Classic Restorations business was ever liquidated or fundamentally changed from its original purpose. I started to read the will. It stated that Clara was indeed the heir to the physical business, the building, the tools, the brand name, and the client list associated with simple restorations. But then came the clause that made my breath catch in my throat. All other assets, it read, including the intellectual property of my ghost operations, the network of patrons, all associated offshore accounts, and the location of my final project, the White Ghost, are to be bequeathed to my wife, Eleanor Vance, contingent upon a single condition. The condition was spelled out in painful detail. If, within 1 year of his passing, Clara demonstrated a failure to honor the true passion of his life's work, defined as prioritizing craftsmanship and legacy over short-term profit, and most importantly, providing my lifelong care and comfort with dignity, then the entirety of the ghost inheritance would fall to me. Kicking me out of my home and telling me I was a sentimental old woman who didn't understand business seemed to fit that description perfectly. The file also contained account numbers for banks in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands, with statements showing a balance that made me feel faint. It was over $40 million. This was the real inheritance. This was his legacy. And then there was the last folder, labeled Project White Ghost. It contained research, photos, and correspondence about a car I had never even heard of. A one-of-a-kind 1938 Phantom Corsair, a futuristic prototype that was considered the holy grail of lost cars. It had disappeared in the 1950s and was rumored to be worth an astronomical amount. The last page of the folder was a single, hand-drawn map of a remote area in the Utah desert, with a set of coordinates and a note. My final gift to you, my love. The end of the last hunt. Suddenly I heard a car pull into the driveway. Headlights washed across the workshop windows. It was Clara and David. They were back. I shoved the file into my large handbag, closed the safe, and swung the pegboard panel shut just as the door to the workshop opened. "Mom?" Clara's voice was sharp with suspicion. "What are you doing here? I thought you were settled in at the villas." I tried to steady my voice, to look like a confused old woman. "Oh, dear. I just got turned around. I thought I left my old knitting basket in here." David looked around the workshop. His eyes narrowed. "Everything seems in order. You should be in your apartment, Eleanor. It's late." His condescending tone, which before would have made me shrink, now felt like fuel. They thought I was a ghost already, a relic to be stored away. They had no idea I was the one who was about to do the haunting. As David escorted me out and drove me back to the villas, lecturing me about senior confusion, I clutched the handbag on my lap. It felt heavier than just paper and ink. It felt like a sword. They had inherited the dusty stage, but I was holding the script to the real play. and the first act was about to begin. The next morning, I didn't call Clara. I called the number for the lawyer mentioned in Arthur's letter, Mr. Abernathy. His office was in Chicago, not in our small town. Mr. Abernathy, I said, my voice clearer and stronger than it had been in years. This is Eleanor Vance. I believe my late husband Arthur left something for you. I have it now. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then a low chuckle. Mrs. Vance, I've been waiting for your call. Your husband told me you were the smartest person he ever knew. He said you'd figure it out. The validation in his voice was like a dam breaking inside me. Arthur hadn't seen me as a sentimental old woman. He'd seen me as his partner, his equal, the only one he could trust with his greatest secret. What do I do now? I asked. Now, Abernathy said, his voice turning serious, you let them continue to underestimate you. Greed makes people careless, and your daughter and her husband are about to get very, very careless. He was right. That afternoon, I saw an online listing from a local real estate agent. It was my house, our house, listed for a quick sale. The description read, charming property with large workshop, perfect for a motivated entrepreneur. Motivated sellers, motivated to erase every trace of the life we had built. Anger, cold and pure, settled in my heart. This wasn't just about money. It was about legacy. It was about respect. It was about proving that this sentimental old woman had a memory like a steel trap and a will to match. I looked at the hand-drawn map, at the file for the white ghost. Clara and David were playing checkers. They had no idea I was setting up a chessboard that spanned continents. The game was on. My first move was to embrace the role they had given me. I became the very picture of a confused, grieving widow settling into her new, diminished life. I joined the knitting circle at the Golden Sunset Villas. I made small talk in the cafeteria about the weather and my grandchildren, who I'd sigh were just so busy with their important lives. I let a few weeks pass, giving Clara and David enough rope to hang themselves with. I learned from a little bird, a chatty nurse who also cared for the mother of my old hairdresser, that Clara was telling everyone that I was struggling with my memory after Arthur's death, but that she was managing my affairs to ensure my comfort. She was building a narrative, a foundation of lies to justify her actions if anyone asked. Meanwhile, in the quiet of my little apartment, I was a woman transformed. I spread Arthur's journals across the floor, cross-referencing names, dates, and locations. I bought a new laptop and learned how to navigate encrypted email servers and offshore banking portals. Mr. Abernathy, true to his word, was my guide. We had calls every evening. He was a gruff, brilliant man in his late 60s who had been Arthur's confidant and legal architect for over 20 years. He explained the intricate web of trusts and shell corporations Arthur had built to protect his fortune and his secrets. Arthur called it the Ghost Ledger, Abernathy explained. It's a completely separate financial ecosystem from the restoration business. Clara has the keys to the corner store, Eleanor. You have the keys to the entire supermarket chain, but it's invisible. I studied the file on the white ghost. The Phantom Corsair was more than a car. It was a myth. A 6-passenger coupe with a futuristic body, it was a one-off creation that had vanished after a tour of the 1939 World's Fair. Arthur's notes indicated he had located it 3 years ago, rusting under a tarp in a forgotten corner of a defunct airfield in the Utah Salt Flats. He had purchased the entire derelict property under a shell corporation to secure it. The final step, the retrieval and resurrection, was what he called his last masterpiece. The map and coordinates were my inheritance, a treasure hunt designed only for me. While I was planning a campaign worthy of a general, Clara was acting like a newly crowned queen of a very small kingdom. She'd started rebranding the shop. She changed the name from Vance Classic Restorations to Vance Bespoke Automotive, a name that David probably thought sounded more appealing to his investor friends. She sold off what she called Arthur's old junk, which I knew from the journals included a rare set of tools for pre-war Italian engines worth over $50,000. She got $600 for them at a local auction. David, meanwhile, was trying to leverage the business's good name to attract investors for a series of high-end resto-mod projects, taking classic car bodies and filling them with modern technology. It was the exact kind of soulless, profitable venture Arthur had despised. It was a clear violation of the will's true passion clause. Abernathy and I documented every move, every sale, every press release, every clueless interview Clara gave to a local business journal about bringing her father's quaint hobby into the 21st century. My next step was to reach out to Arthur's network. His journals listed 3 key patrons. These weren't just clients, they were disciples of his craft. The first on the list was a man named Marcus Thorne, a reclusive tech billionaire in California, known for having one of the most exclusive car collections in the world. Arthur had described him as a man who understands that some things are priceless. Finding him was difficult, but Arthur's journal had a private number. I took a deep breath and made the call. A formal British voice answered. Thorne residence. My name is Eleanor Vance, I said, my voice steady. I'm calling for Mr. Thorne. It's a personal matter regarding my late husband, Arthur. I expected to be shut down, but the name Arthur Vance was an immediate password. I was put through to Marcus Thorne himself. His voice was younger than I expected, sharp and intense. Mrs. Vance, I was deeply saddened to hear of Arthur's passing. He was more than a genius. He was an artist. The world is a less interesting place without him. We spoke for nearly an hour. I told him everything. About Clara, about being pushed out of my home, about the secret will. He listened without interruption. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. That is a profound disappointment, he finally said, referring to Clara's actions. Arthur spoke of his daughter. He hoped she would one day appreciate the legacy, but he feared she had her mother's practicality without her mother's wisdom. He paused. And the white ghost? Did he tell you where it was? I have the coordinates, I said. Thorne let out a low whistle. He found it. The old master actually found it. Eleanor, you must understand, that car isn't just a vehicle, it's a unicorn. There are people, very wealthy and very unscrupulous people, who have been hunting for it for decades. If word gets out that it's been located, it could become very dangerous. That was when he told me about a rival collector, a ruthless Russian oligarch named Petrov. Arthur had mentioned him in the journals as the Vulture, a man who didn't appreciate the history of the cars, only the status of possessing them. Petrov had tried to strong-arm Arthur into finding cars for him for years, but Arthur had always refused. Your daughter's public activities are drawing attention, Thorne warned. This rebranding, the talk of expansion. People in our world are noticing. They are wondering what assets the legendary Arthur Vance might have left behind. Petrov's people will be sniffing around. If Clara and her husband get one whiff of the Phantom Corsair, they'll try to sell it to the highest bidder, and that will likely be Petrov. They have no idea the kind of sharks they would be dealing with. His words sent a chill down my spine. This was no longer a family squabble over an inheritance. This was a high-stakes game with dangerous players. My sentimentality, my desire to protect Arthur's legacy, was now a race against my own daughter's greed and ignorance. What should I do? I asked. For now, lay low, Thorne advised. Let them make their mistakes. I will make some quiet inquiries and put the word out in the right circles that Arthur's real legacy is secure and accounted for. It might deter some of the vultures. But Eleanor, you need to secure that car. Soon. After the call, Abernathy and I devised a plan. The first step was to legally trigger the contingency clause in the will. We had more than enough evidence. Abernathy filed a petition with the probate court, a sealed document that wouldn't be made public yet. It laid out Clara's actions and invoked the clause that transferred the Ghost Ledger assets, including the shell corporation that owned the Utah property, to me. Legally, the white ghost was now mine. Getting to it was another matter. Thorne offered to send his own private security team, but I refused. This was Arthur's last gift to me. It was my hunt. I needed to do it myself. I used some of the funds from one of the smaller offshore accounts, a discretionary fund Arthur had set up to make my preparations. I bought a satellite phone. I researched the terrain in Utah, and I booked a private charter flight from a small airfield an hour away. The most crucial part of the plan was a diversion. We needed to make Clara and David look in the wrong direction to keep them busy while I was gone, and I knew just how to do it. Arthur had a long-running, friendly rivalry with another restoration shop in Arizona. The owner, a man named Gus, was a good man, but loved to boast. I decided to leak a rumor. Using an anonymous email address, I sent a tip to a well-known classic car blog, hinting that a major undiscovered Vance project was located in a storage unit in Flagstaff, Arizona, and that Vance Bespoke Automotive was close to announcing it. As I'd hoped, the rumor spread like wildfire through the car community. Within days, Clara and David were getting calls. The idea that there was a secret, valuable project they didn't know about was irresistible to them. Their greed and ego wouldn't let them ignore it. I knew from my nurse friends' gossip that they had packed their bags and driven to Arizona in a flurry of excitement, ready to claim their prize. They were chasing a ghost, but it was the wrong one. With them out of the way, my path was clear. I packed a small, sturdy bag. I looked at myself in the mirror of my tiny apartment. The woman looking back was not the lost, grieving widow from a month ago. My eyes were clear, my expression determined. I was Arthur Vance's wife. I was the keeper of his legacy. I left a note on my table for the staff, saying I was visiting an old friend for a few days. Then I walked out of the Golden Sunset Villas, got into a pre-booked car service, and headed for the airfield. As the small jet took off, climbing into the dawn sky, I looked down at the world below. It felt like I was shedding my old life like a skin. Clara and David thought they had put me in a box. They didn't realize they had just given me the freedom to fly. A few hours later, I landed at a private airstrip in rural Utah. A rugged, pre-rented Jeep was waiting for me. There was no one around for miles, just the vast, silent expanse of the desert. I entered the coordinates from Arthur's map into a GPS unit. The destination was 100 miles away, deep in a region called the Forbidden Canyon. As I drove, the paved roads gave way to dirt tracks, and then to nothing but raw, rocky terrain. The silence was profound. It was beautiful and intimidating. I felt a sense of connection to Arthur, imagining him out here, on his own secret adventure. Finally, after hours of careful driving, the GPS indicated I had arrived. Before me was a chain-link fence with a faded "No Trespassing" sign. This was the defunct airfield. I used the bolt cutters I had brought to snip the lock on the gate. Inside, a collection of dilapidated hangars stood like silent sentinels under the blazing sun. Arthur's notes indicated the car was in Hangar 4. The hangar was huge and dark. The air was thick with the dust of decades. And there, in the far corner, under a massive, rotting canvas tarp, was a shape. It was long, low, and impossibly curved. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I walked toward it, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. With trembling hands, I reached for the edge of the tarp. I pulled it back, and I gasped. The Phantom Corsair was breathtaking. Even covered in a thick layer of dust, its futuristic alien design was like nothing I had ever seen. The body was a single, sweeping piece of metal, with no running boards and enclosed wheels. It looked like a spaceship designed in the 1930s. It was the White Ghost, and it was real. Tucked into the driver's seat was a small sealed envelope with my name on it, written in Arthur's familiar script. I opened it. My dearest Eleanor, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means you have proven me right once again. You were always the true adventurer in our family. I've left you one last surprise. The car is magnificent, but the real treasure is in the trunk. It's the key to our future, and the final checkmate in the game I had to set up to protect you. Be careful, and know that I loved you more than all the stars in this desert sky. The trunk? What could be in the trunk? I found the release latch and opened it. Inside wasn't gold or cash. It was a collection of ledgers. But these weren't Arthur's. The leather was different, stamped with a small, unfamiliar crest. I opened the top one. The pages were filled with handwritten notes, account numbers, and names. I recognized one of them instantly. Petrov, the Russian oligarch Marcus Thorne had warned me about. And next to his name were details of transactions, offshore accounts, and notes on art smuggling, tax evasion, and money laundering, all tied to his classic car acquisitions. Arthur hadn't just been a car finder, he had been a silent detective. While dealing with this hidden world, he had been meticulously documenting the illegal activities of its most dangerous players. This wasn't just a car, it was a treasure chest of evidence, and Arthur had just handed it to me. My satellite phone buzzed. It was Marcus Thorne. Eleanor, I have some bad news. The rumor you started worked a little too well. It didn't just attract your daughter, it attracted Petrov. My sources say one of his reconnaissance teams is on a flight to Arizona, but when they find nothing there, they will start looking elsewhere. And their methods of finding information are much more aggressive than your son-in-law's. You need to get out of there. They know about Arthur's connection to the Corsair. They just never knew where it was. Your daughter's noisemaking has put it back in play. My blood ran cold. I was standing in a remote hangar miles from anywhere, with a priceless car and a trunk full of incriminating evidence against a ruthless oligarch who was now actively searching for me. The game had just escalated beyond my wildest imagination. My first instinct was panic. My second was to look at the car, this magnificent, silent beast, and then at the ledgers in my hand. Arthur had called this the final checkmate. He wouldn't have led me into a trap. He would have provided a way out. I had to think like he would. The car itself was the target, but the ledgers were the weapon. Petrov wanted the car, but he would want the ledgers to disappear even more. I called Marcus Thorne back. Marcus, Arthur left something else in the car. Ledgers, detailing Petrov's financial crimes. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. My God, Eleanor. Arthur was playing a deeper game than any of us knew. That's not a treasure chest. It's a nuclear bomb. You can't just run, you need to leverage it. Leverage. The word echoed in the dusty hangar. I looked around. I was alone, a 70-year-old woman in the middle of nowhere. But I had a priceless car, a satellite phone, and a file that could dismantle a criminal empire. I wasn't helpless. I was armed. Here's what we're going to do, I said to Marcus, my voice gaining a firmness that surprised even me. I need you to do two things. First, arrange for a transport truck, the best and most discreet you can find, to come to these coordinates. It needs to be here in 12 hours. Second, I need you to get a message to Petrov, anonymously. Tell him the white ghost has been found, and so has his private accounting. Tell him the new owner is willing to negotiate, and the meeting is at this location in 24 hours. Just him, no teams. Marcus was silent for a moment. Eleanor, that's incredibly risky. You'd be face to face with a killer. No, I corrected him. He'll be face to face with the one person who can either give him his prize or send him to prison for the rest of his life. He won't harm me until he has those ledgers, and he won't get the ledgers until the car is safe. It was a gamble, a massive one, but it felt right. It felt like a move Arthur would have made. While I waited, I explored the hangar. In a locked side room, I found what I was looking for, a small generator and fuel cans. Arthur's foresight was astounding. I hooked it up, and soon the hangar was filled with the soft glow of a few bare light bulbs. I spent the next few hours with the car. I found the keys hidden in a magnetic box under the chassis. The engine miraculously turned over after a few tries, the sound a deep, guttural roar that echoed like a waking dragon. The 12 hours until the transport arrived were the longest of my life. But just as the sun began to rise, a state-of-the-art, unmarked semi-truck rolled up to the gate. The driver was a professional, a man Thorne had used for years. He said nothing, simply got to work, expertly winching the Phantom Corsair into the enclosed trailer. I handed him the keys and the ledgers. "Take the car to the address Mr. Thorne provided," I instructed, "and give these ledgers to him personally. Do not stop for anyone." He nodded, and a few minutes later, the truck was gone, leaving me alone again in the now empty hangar, with nothing but my wits and my satellite phone. The countdown to Petrov's arrival began. Exactly 24 hours after my call to Marcus, a black helicopter descended from the sky, kicking up a storm of dust. It landed 100 yards from the hangar. A single man emerged, tall and imposing in a tailored suit that looked out of place in the desert. It was Petrov. He walked toward me with the predatory grace of a shark. "You are the one?" he asked, his Russian accent thick. "Mrs. Vance?" "I am," I said, my voice not betraying the frantic beating of my heart. "Where is the car?" he demanded, his eyes scanning the empty hangar. "It's safe," I said, "and so is your little black book, the one Arthur kept for you." His eyes narrowed. "You have nerve, old woman. What do you want?" "It's simple," I replied, holding my ground. "You're going to buy my daughter's business, Vance Bespoke Automotive. You're going to pay a ridiculously inflated price for it, say $10 million. You will see it as a fee for my silence and for the return of your ledgers. The money will be transferred to a trust controlled by my lawyer. Once the sale is complete and my daughter has been paid, the ledgers will be destroyed, and you and I will never speak again. The car is not part of the deal. It is mine. Consider it Arthur's final fee for services rendered." Petrov stared at me, a mix of fury and disbelief on his face. He was being outmaneuvered by a grandmother in the middle of the desert. He probably thought he could just kill me and find the ledgers himself. "What makes you think I won't just take what I want?" he snarled. "Because," I said, holding up my satellite phone, "I'm currently on an open line with my associate, Mr. Thorne. He has the ledgers. If I don't check in with him with a confirmation code in the next 5 minutes, he has instructions to release copies to the FBI, Interpol, and the New York Times. Your move." Checkmate. He knew I wasn't bluffing. The risk was too great. He cursed in Russian, then pulled out his own phone and made a call. "There is a small automotive company, Vance Bespoke. Buy it. I don't care the price. 10 million. Wire the funds to the account her lawyer provides. Now." The deal was done. He got back in his helicopter and disappeared into the sky. I called Marcus and gave him the code. The ledgers were safe, and so was the car. 2 days later, I was back in my small apartment at the Golden Sunset Villas when Clara and David returned from their wild goose chase in Arizona. They burst into my room, their faces a mask of fury and frustration. "What did you do, Mom?" Clara screamed. "The rumor was a fake. We looked like fools." Before I could answer, David's phone rang. He listened for a moment, his face going from confusion to shock to utter disbelief. "What is it?" Clara demanded. "That was our business broker," he stammered, his eyes wide. "Someone just bought the business, the whole thing, lock, stock, and barrel, for $10 million. The money is already in escrow." Clara stared at him, then at me. She couldn't comprehend it. In her mind, the business was a struggling enterprise they were heroically saving. "10 million?" she whispered. "Who? Why?" "An anonymous investor from Europe," I supplied calmly. "Apparently, they see potential in the brand name. They were so blinded by the sudden windfall that they didn't even question the absurdity of it. They had their money. the prize they had been willing to throw me away for. They signed the papers without a second thought, eager to cash in. What they didn't know was that the sale agreement, drafted by Abernathy and Petrov's lawyers, included a non-compete clause that barred them from working in the classic automotive industry anywhere in the world for the rest of their lives. They had sold their birthright for a pot of gold, not realizing the mine it came from. A week later, after the funds had cleared and my daughter and son-in-law had moved on to planning their new life of leisure, I checked out of the Golden Sunset Villas. A sleek black car sent by Marcus Thorne picked me up. It drove me to a private hangar at the local airport. And there it was, the Phantom Corsair, cleaned and polished, gleaming under the hangar lights. It was more beautiful than I could have imagined. Marcus was there waiting for me. "Eleanor," he said with a broad smile, "you are, without a doubt, the most formidable woman I have ever met. Arthur would be so proud." "He knew," I said, running a hand over the car's cool fender. "He knew I had it in me." In the following months, my life transformed. I didn't need the $10 million from Petrov, as Arthur's ghost ledger fortune was more than I could ever spend. So, I used it to start a foundation in Arthur's name. The Vance Legacy Foundation for Artisanal Craftsmanship. We provide scholarships and grants to young mechanics, welders, and engineers who want to learn the dying arts of manual restoration. We're preserving the true passion Arthur wrote about. I moved into a beautiful home on a lake, with a large, climate-controlled workshop out back where the White Ghost now resides. It's not a museum piece. I drive it on quiet country roads, the engine rumbling like a contented lion. It's a reminder that the greatest treasures are often hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone with the right eyes to see them. I got a letter from Clara a few weeks ago. It was full of boasts about their new life, their new investments, and a trip around the world. There was no apology, no remorse. She mentioned in passing that she heard a rumor that the famous Phantom Corsair had been found by some reclusive collector. Can you believe it, Mom? A car like that, lost for all those years. It must be worth over $40 million. Some people have all the luck. I smiled as I read the letter. I folded it neatly and placed it in a box with other relics of a life that was no longer mine. She had the money, but I had the legacy. She thought she had won, but she had never even been in the real game. She would never know the truth about her father, about his secret life, or about the sentimental old woman she had so foolishly underestimated. Some people do have all the luck, I thought. But for some of us, it isn't luck. It's love. And it's a legacy that's built to last. Thank you for listening to my story today. I tell a new one every day, so be sure to follow and ring that notification bell so you don't miss what happens tomorrow. And if you want to watch another story that will keep you on the edge of your seat, just click on one of the videos you see on the screen now. You won't be disappointed.